Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into a new MOBA called Sirocco.
Oh,
Um, from what I understand,
what?
this is a pretty unique game,
Yeah.
especially if you've ever, maybe suffered through a game like League of Legends.
Yeah.
We'll be looking at a recent article from PCGamesN to kind of get to the bottom of what makes this game tick
Okay.
and see if it really is a breath of fresh air in a genre that can, well, let's face it, sometimes be a little bit intense.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's really interesting about Sirocco is that it kind of goes back to the roots of the MOBA genre.
Okay.
Inspired by the Warcraft 3 mod Battleships.
Oh, cool.
That mod was really about just straight up fun.
Okay.
There weren't any like complex item builds or anything like that. It was just pure strategic combat, which is very different from what you see in some of the bigger MOBAs out there today, like your League of Legends or Dota too.
So you're saying I can finally ditch the spreadsheets and just focus on like blowing stuff up?
Exactly, yeah. You don't need a degree in economics to play this game.
Exactly.
But there's a twist.
Right.
Instead of controlling a single hero, like you do in most MOBAs,
Okay.
Sirocco has you commanding a whole squadron of battleships.
Oh, wow. So it's like I'm an admiral or something.
Exactly. You're in charge of a fleet of 5 battleships.
Wow.
Each with their own strengths and weaknesses. And the combat's pretty unique too, because most of the weapons in this game, they're auto-firing.
Wait, hold on. Auto-firing, doesn't that kind of take away some of the skill? I mean, part of the fun in MOBAs is mastering those, clutch attacks.
I know. It sounds a little weird, but trust me, it actually adds a whole new layer of strategy.
Exactly.
Yeah, because while your weapons are firing automatically, the real challenge comes from positioning your ships.
Okay, yeah.
You got to think about maximizing your damage, predicting your opponent's movements,
Right.
and of course, landing those crucial skill shots.
Gotcha. So it's more about strategy and outmaneuvering your opponents than just, clicking like crazy.
Yeah, exactly. It's about the big picture, not just micromanaging every little attack.
I see. So they've kind of streamlined the combat without dumbing it down.
Exactly.
They've still got that tactical depth.
Yeah, and to add to that depth, Sirocco offers a lot of variety in terms of the ships, weapons, and even captains you can choose from.
Okay, so we're talking different ships, different weapons,
Yep.
and now captains too.
Captains, that's right.
That's a lot to keep track of.
It is, but it adds a lot of strategic depth.
Okay.
So you have 21 unique ships to choose from, each with its own playstyle. Then you've got 24 different weapons that you can equip on your ships.
Wow, that's a lot of combinations.
It is. And then on top of that, you've got 7 different captains, and they each influence your gameplay in a distinct way.
Okay, so what exactly do these captains do? Are they like special characters that you can control on the battlefield?
Not exactly. Think of the captains as like a pre-game specialization.
Okay.
They influence the type of power-ups you get during a match. These power-ups are called loom coils.
Loom coils.
Loom coils, yeah. So choosing a captain isn't just cosmetic. It's like picking a starting path on a skill tree. It shapes your strategy right from the start.
Loom coils.
Yeah.
Now I'm picturing some magical device just spitting out random power-ups.
Haha. Yeah, it's a little bit like that.
Like a nautical slot machine or something.
You're not far off. Think of them like the boons you get in a game like Hades. They draw up randomly during the match.
Okay.
Then they can drastically change the course of the battle.
So it's like every match is a new puzzle to solve, depending on what loop coils you get.
That's a great way to put it.
That definitely keeps things interesting.
Yeah, it adds that roguelike element that a lot of players love.
Now, you mentioned earlier that there's a twist to this whole, commanding a squadron thing.
There is.
And I'm guessing it's not just the auto-firing weapons and the loom coils?
You're right. The biggest twist is that Sirocco lets you switch between your ships mid-battle.
Whoa, hold on. You can switch ships, like in the middle of a fight.
Yep, you heard that right.
Now that is a game changer.
It is, right? It's unlike anything you see in other MOBAs.
Yeah, I mean, usually you're locked into one hero for the entire match. But with ship switching, it's like a whole new level of strategy opens up.
Absolutely. Suddenly, you're not just thinking about countering your opponents at the character select screen.
Yeah.
You're adapting and countering them in real time.
That's amazing. It's like blending MOBAs with hero switching games like Overwatch 2 or Marvel Rivals.
Exactly. You're never stuck with a pick that just isn't working. You can always adapt to the situation.
That sounds incredibly dynamic. But wouldn't some hardcore MOBA fans argue that this makes the game less competitive?
Oh, for sure. I mean, some players love the challenge of mastering a single character and, I mean, really pushing their limits.
Yeah, it's all about individual skill.
Right, but I think Sirocco's approach could actually open up the competitive scene in a whole new way. It's not just about individual skill anymore.
Okay.
It becomes about strategic flexibility
Interesting.
and team synergy. You need to be able to think on your feet and have a deep understanding of the entire roster, not just one ship or one captain.
So you're saying it kind of adds a new layer of complexity to the competitive scene.
Exactly. It's a different kind of mastery. Instead of mastering one hero, you're mastering the entire game.
That's a really cool way to look at it. So they've taken the core concept of MOBAs, those big strategic team battles, and injected them with this whole new dose of adaptability.
Yep, and surprise, your opponents never know what you're going to do next.
Exactly. Now, speaking of surprises, the author of this PCGamesN article, Lauren Bergen, actually had some pretty strong opinions about, traditional MOBAs.
Oh, really?
They described their experience with games like League of Legends as like a form of torture.
Oh, wow.
They cited things like toxicity and that really intense pressure to perform.
Yeah, I can definitely see where they're coming from.
And it's a sentiment that I think resonates with a lot of players.
Yeah.
The competitive nature of some of these games.
Yeah.
It can create this really toxic environment.
It can.
And for people who aren't necessarily looking for that hardcore, grind, it can be really off-putting.
Definitely. It can feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells.
So with Sirocco and their emphasis on having fun and creating a more relaxed atmosphere, I'm wondering if that could be a breath of fresh air, not just for new players, but also for veterans who are just tired of all that negativity.
It could be. I think a lot of players are craving a more positive and inclusive community. Yeah. And Sirocco might just be the answer.
And it's not just about, avoiding the negativity.
Right.
I think it also goes back to like rediscovering that joy of gaming, reminding us that it's not always about being the best.
Yeah.
It's about having fun and connecting with other people.
Exactly. Sometimes we forget that, games are supposed to be fun. It's easy to get caught up in the competition.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe this shift towards a more positive community in Sirocco could even have a ripple effect on other MOBAs.
I hope so. We could use a little more positivity in the gaming world.
Couldn't agree more. But okay, let's go back to Sirocco's gameplay for a second. We've talked about auto-firing weapons. We've talked about ship switching. We've talked about these loom coils. But I'm curious about the overall pacing of the game.
Okay.
Does it feel as frantic and intense as some other MOBAs? Or is it more measured and strategic?
From what we've seen so far, it seems like it strikes a good balance between the two.
Okay.
The combat is definitely fast-paced.
Yeah.
But the focus on positioning, like we talked about, and those crucial skill shots, it adds that layer of tactical thinking, so it keeps things from feeling too chaotic.
Right, so controlled chaos.
Yeah, exactly. Controlled chaos is a good way to put it.
And with those loom coils constantly shaking things up, there's always an element of surprise, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. You always have to be ready to adapt your strategy.
That's great. It keeps players on their toes.
Exactly. You can't just stick to the same strategy every match. You have to be flexible.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And speaking of keeping players on their toes, there's actually a really exciting opportunity coming up for anyone who wants to try Sirocco for themselves.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Sirocco will have a demo available during Steam Next Fest. It starts on Monday, February 24th.
That's awesome. It's a great chance for anyone who's intrigued by what we've talked about today to jump in and see what the game is actually like.
Exactly. And sometimes demos can be kind of limited, but I have a feeling this one is going to give players a really good taste of what Sirocco has to offer.
I know I'll be checking it out. I'm really curious to see how all these elements come together in actual gameplay. And beyond the mechanics and, the community and all that, there's just something about Sirocco that feels different. It really seems to capture that sense of pure gaming joy.
It does. It's like they've bottled up that feeling of excitement and wonder that we all felt when we first discovered MOBAs, back before they became so competitive and complex.
And that's a pretty powerful thing. It reminds us why we fell in love with these games in the first place.
I completely agree. It's all about rediscovering the fun.
Exactly. But ultimately, the success of Sirocco hinges on whether it can really deliver on its promise of fun, accessibility, and strategic depth.
Yeah, it's got to live up to the hype.
And that's where you, our listeners, come in. We want to hear your thoughts.
Definitely. We want to know what you think.
Once you've had a chance to play the demo during Steam Next Fest, come back and tell us about your experience.
Exactly. Did it live up to the hype? Did it feel like a true evolution of the MOBA genre?
We're eager to hear your insights. I think it definitely could. It's like they're asking players to master the game as a whole, not just a single character.
Exactly. And that ties back to what we were talking about earlier about accessibility and just, making the genre more fun.
Right, right.
It really seems like they're trying to lower that barrier to entry for newer players.
Yeah.
But also, still provide enough depth for veteran players to really sink their teeth into.
And speaking of accessibility, Lauren Bergen, the author of this article, they had a really strong opinion about the state of traditional MOBAs.
Oh, yeah.
They actually described their experience with games like League of Legends as a form of torture.
Oh, wow.
And they talk about the toxicity and just that pressure to perform.
Yeah, that resonates with a lot of players. I mean, that's a sentiment that I've heard echoed across the community.
Yeah, it's definitely a real issue.
It is.
So do you think Sirocco, with their focus on fun and creating a more relaxed atmosphere, that could lead to a more positive and inclusive community?
I hope so. I think that's something that a lot of us are really looking for, not just in MOBAs, but in gaming as a whole.
Yeah, and it's not just about, avoiding the negativity.
Right.
It's also about rediscovering that joy of gaming.
Yeah.
Like remembering why we started playing these games in the first place.
Exactly. Sometimes it's easy to forget that games are supposed to be fun.
And who knows, maybe this shift towards more positive community in Sirocco could actually have a ripple effect across the whole genre.
Yeah, that'd be amazing, right? Like a more positive gaming culture in general.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. But, it's not just about the community.
Right.
Sirocco also challenges traditional MOBA conventions with its gameplay.
Exactly. Okay, so we've talked about the auto-firing weapons, the ship switching, those loom coils. But what about the overall pacing of the game?
Oh, yeah.
Does it feel as frantic and intense as, like, a Dota 2 match? Or is it more strategic and measured?
I think it strikes a really good balance between the two.
Okay.
Like, the combat is definitely fast-paced, but they focus on positioning, like we've discussed, and landing those skill shots. That adds a layer of tactical thinking that keeps things from being too chaotic.
Right, so it's not just a click fest.
No, it's not just a click fest.
There's actually strategy involved.
A lot of strategy, actually. You've got to constantly be thinking ahead.
And with those loom coils, those random power-ups always dropping, it seems like there's always an element of surprise.
Oh, for sure. You never know what you're going to get, so you've always got to be ready to adapt.
Keeps things interesting.
Absolutely.
And speaking of keeping things interesting, there's one more aspect of Sirocco that we need to touch on.
Okay.
And it's actually a big one.
Oh, right. The demo. I almost forgot. Sirocco is going to be part of Steam Next Fest.
Yeah?
Starting Monday, February 24th.
Mark your calendars, everyone. This is a chance to actually get your hands on the game and see what it's all about.
Yeah, it's the perfect opportunity to try before you buy.
And we'll make sure to include a link in the show notes so you can easily find the demo.
Definitely. We'll hook you up.
Okay, so now that we've covered all of that, what's your overall feeling about Sirocco? I mean, we've talked about the mechanics, we've talked about the community, but there's just something about this game that feels different. Right?
It does, doesn't it? Like, it really captures that sense of pure gaming joy.
Yeah.
That, a lot of us have been missing. It reminds me of, like, the early days of MOBAs.
Yeah.
Back when it was all about having fun.
When it was simpler.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just really refreshing to see a game that prioritizes that.
It is. It gives me hope for the future of the genre,
But ultimately, the success of Sirocco, it's going to depend on whether it can actually deliver on this promise of fun, accessibility, and strategic depth.
Yeah, it's a tall order, but I think they're on the right track.
And that's where you, our listeners, come in. We want to hear from you. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, tell us what you think.
We really want to hear your impressions. Does it live up to the hype?
Yeah, does it feel like, something truly new and different in the MOBA world?
We're really eager to get your take on it.
Yeah, and it always helps to get these different perspectives from our listeners.
Absolutely.
And, kind of add them to the conversation.
Yeah, it helps us all understand these, evolving trends in gaming.
For sure.
Now, before we wrap up, I think it's worth mentioning Lauren Bergen again.
Yeah.
The author of this article from PCGamesN.
Mm-hmm.
Their perspective as a seasoned MOBA player, it really adds a lot of weight to this discussion.
It does.
They talked about how the complexity
Yeah.
and sometimes toxic nature of MOBAs like League of Legends really led to them feeling burned out.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. to highlight, I think.
Yeah.
It shows why this focus on fun and accessibility that Sirocco has could be a game changer. Not just for new players, but also for people who have been turned off by those more hardcore elements of the genre.
It's like Sirocco is offering a chance to, rediscover the joy of MOBAs.
Exactly.
Stripping away all that unnecessary pressure and complexity
Yes.
and just getting back to the heart of what makes these games so engaging.
Absolutely. And that's a really powerful message.
Yeah.
Especially in a gaming landscape that's so often focused on grinding and competition.
Mm-hmm.
It's so refreshing to see a game that prioritizes pure enjoyment
Yeah.
and welcomes players of all skill levels.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Sirocco, I'm left with this question.
Okay.
Could this be the start of something bigger? Could Sirocco's success lead to a whole new wave of MOBAs that embrace this idea of accessibility,
Yeah.
positivity, a more relaxed approach to competition?
I think that's a great question and something to really think about. As you explore the Sirocco demo during Steam Next Fest,
Yeah.
keep that question in mind.
Yeah.
Pay attention to how the game feels,
Right.
the community that forms around it. Yeah. And most importantly, your own experience as a player.
Does it make you feel welcome?
Yeah, does
Yeah.
it rekindle that spark of joy that maybe you've lost along the way with other MOBAs?
And your insights, they could be part of a larger conversation
Exactly.
about the future of gaming
Yeah.
and what we really value in these interactive experiences.
Absolutely. It's a conversation worth having.
Well, on that note, we'll leave you to chart your own course
Easy.
through the vast and ever-changing seas of the MOBA genre. Until next time, happy gaming, everyone!